Most of us spend a lot of time looking outside of ourselves for answers that we're always going to have to come from within. Be your own fucking guru. That's what this series is about. I'm Ryan Paul McGuigan, and this is Beneath the Noise. So, you've done the practice, and you've been pointed back here. Whatever came up in there, whether it felt significant or it was subtle, whether it surprised you or whether you're still sitting with it and not quite sure what to make of it yet, I want to start by saying it was real and it was yours. The structure created the conditions, but nothing in there was put there from the outside. What you heard came from you. And that's the whole point of the message of be your own fucking guru. And I think that's worth a moment before we go anywhere else, because most people spend most of their lives looking for answers somewhere out there. Another book, another framework, another person who seems to have it all figured out. And what you just did was the opposite of that. You got quiet, you listened from the inside, and something was there. I do want to be honest with you, though, about something. And I'm not saying this to diminish what you've just experienced, but because I think it's actually the most useful thing I can offer you right now. What happened in episode 9 was designed to do one specific thing, to show you that the signal is there, that it's always there, and to give you some inner wisdom on a specific focal point that's important to you. To show you that beneath the noise, beneath the analytical mind running at full speed with all its questions and its overcautious commentary and its circling. And there's something worth listening to. And you've had now a direct experience of that. That's something. That's actually quite a significant thing. What I do with people over 7 weeks is built on exactly that. The same signal, the same quality of listening, but held inside a specially structured container over time with depth and progression, and someone alongside them to help guide them in it. A container is a completely different thing, and what becomes possible inside one is what I want to talk to you about now. I want to tell you about a couple of people. The first one I'm going to call Jack, out of respect for his privacy. Jack came to me in a genuinely dark place and had been there for a long time. During the clarity call, he told me he wanted clarity on his career. He'd been doing work, the same work since his early childhood, and was considering a move into something in the wellness space. He felt drawn to the idea of helping people feel better. The profundity of that not registering with me at this stage. But driving the career question, the situation he described was this. He felt like he was being taken advantage of at work. A strained relationship with his boss. Colleagues he felt weren't pulling their weight, leaving him constantly picking up the slack. Overworked, underappreciated, and totally exhausted. Deep resentment that had been building for a long time. Anger issues that were bleeding into his home life, and the guilt of knowing that his wife and daughter weren't getting the best of him because of it. And then he said something I've never forgotten. He said he just didn't see any joy in life. And he meant that quite literally. Every day just seemed like a struggle. He tried a lot of things already. Therapy, Wim Hof breathing exercises, cold water therapy, other types of meditation. He found genuine value in all of it, he told me. He was still doing most of it, but none of it gave him the relief he so badly needed. He opened up to me then as we went along, and he told me about traumatic childhood events that left him feeling more confused about himself than anything else. He wanted to get a better understanding of himself. He still didn't really know who he was. Before deciding to work with Jack, I had to draw a very clear line about what I thought I could help him with and what I couldn't. I told him I could help him get clarity about his work situation and help him get a better understanding of himself. But I could not and did not promise anything about changing his overall situation. So we agreed to work together on that basis. In the first session, Jack got some solid insight and understanding about himself. It was the basis of everything that followed. He continued to build on it through the sessions, and his life was changing in real time as a result. Same life, different lens. So what changed? In the first few sessions, Jack had learned to love and accept himself. The confusion about who he was resolved. He realized the person underneath the trauma was worthy of love, happiness, and success. And the meaning he'd given his experience and carried all those years were not facts. When he returned to work, he spoke maturely and confidently with his boss, and he set clear boundaries with him and his colleagues. The need to people please and take on their roles and responsibilities disappeared overnight, and the feeling of being taken advantage of disappeared with it. The exhaustion, the resentment, the anger issues, all resolved downstream. There was no more guilt about how he was showing up for his family, and the relationships grew stronger than ever. He had a complete shift in his perspective, from not being able to see any joy in life to seeing a world full of possibilities, as he put it. Jack actually decided to stay at his job and keep the idea of another career on the back burner, but as a passion project he genuinely wanted to pursue when the time was right, not as an escape from the problems he'd been experiencing till then. No one, including me, could have predicted this outcome, and I believe no consumption of anything outside of himself could have produced that outcome, not least because he'd already tried everything he knew to think of. I've seen this pattern in everyone I've worked with. Whatever symptom they were coming in to address ended up being resolved from a blind spot of the analytical mind. The work doesn't give them that answer from the outside. They find it in themselves from somewhere they hadn't been able to access before. That's what this reaches that the other things don't. The second person I want to tell you about is Colin. Colin came to me with a very specific problem. He knew what he wanted. He had ideas he genuinely believed in. Things he'd been meaning to start for years. The intention was real, but something sat between the thought and the action, and it wouldn't move, regardless of how clear the thinking got. In theory, it should have been just a case of telling yourself to do the thing and do it. But it isn't. He described it precisely. He wanted to turn thought into action. He'd had a difficult few years. COVID had thrown him badly off course. An existential crisis, in his own words. And in the years since, he'd been trying to find his way back to something that felt more like himself, more energized, more at peace. He had a book he'd been wanting to write for years. He wanted to get back to taking care of himself physically, to feel better, move better, engage with life more fully. He knew what he wanted. He just couldn't seem to make himself follow through. And again, in his own words, he was a hostage to his own self-limiting beliefs. So he was aware of these beliefs, but he couldn't seem to break free from them himself. He wanted to, quote unquote, turn I can't into I can. He was clear about what the problem was and what he wanted the outcome to be. Most people are by this time. So during the work then, something happened that neither of us had anticipated. Colin revisited memories from his childhood. He was the youngest child. His parents had separated when he was about 7 or 8 years old, and he remembered going between the two homes. He described oftentimes feeling like he'd fallen down through the cracks, a bit overlooked, a bit neglected even. None of which he'd mentioned at the beginning. It just wasn't part of how he understood his own situation. Neither of us had a clue that's where the work would take him. And then something happened that still stays with me. Because from within the work, looking back at those same memories, that wasn't the feeling he was getting at all. He sat there across the screen from me, beaming, recounting story after story from his childhood, recognizing the love that had been there from his parents and his siblings, that his perception had simply filtered out all those years. He was looking at the same memories through a completely different lens. And I want to be clear, I didn't tell him to see it differently. Nobody reframed it for him. He found it in himself, from somewhere the analytical mind couldn't reach on its own. Because if you could just decide to see something like that differently, he'd have done it years ago. His self-esteem came back. His self-acceptance came back. His self-confidence came back. He also remembered himself from his university days, more confident in how he was moving through the world, more comfortable in his own skin, and he concluded that he would carry more of that version of himself forward to meet his more mature self of today. When the conversation about the book came back around, he realized what had actually been holding him back. The fear of how it would be received after he'd written it, the exposure, the judgment of others. And at the same moment, he realized something else. The book wasn't for anybody else. It was for him. A vehicle to simply express himself. And what everyone else thought about it became completely irrelevant. So he got to work soon after, compiling his notes and his ideas. And the subject matter? His childhood memories. I can still see his face. A few weeks later, as the program was progressing and we were talking about how things were going, he just casually dropped in that he'd been back at the gym for the past few weeks. I was a little taken aback. You didn't think that this was something worth mentioning? And he said, honestly, I just hadn't thought it was that big of a deal. There had been a complete shift in how he was seeing and feeling about himself. And for this person, going to the gym just felt like the normal and obvious thing to do. There was no force, no willpower, no self-discipline required. It simply felt right. Colin had been stuck for the better part of about 5 years. The work took 7 weeks, but the real changes took even less. The gap between the thought and action can stretch for years when the thing underneath it hasn't shifted. When the thing underneath it does shift, the gap tends to close on its own. And I knew I could help these two gents, but neither of those two outcomes were predicted or predictable. Not by Jack, not by Colin, and not by me. What shifted was something the analytical mind hadn't been looking for and couldn't have found on its own. And everything downstream changed with it. That's been consistent in my own experience and all the people that I've worked with. That's what the container produces, a depth of access. How that depth combines with an ongoing practice and the life that makes possible is what the next episode is about. Thanks for listening to Beneath the Noise. If something in this landed for you, pass it on to someone you think could use it. And the next episode is there when you're ready.